Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Nubeva's channel. We're, of course, sitting here once again with Randy, and today Randy and I have a couple different interesting topics we're going to dive into. But first off, Randy, how are you doing over there on the other side of the U.S.?
Doing excellent. California weather is now feeling like California, and Real Madrid is in the UCL semifinals, and hopefully, fingers crossed, in the finals. So, feeling good.
Wonderful, wonderful. Glad to hear it. Here in Ohio, we touched 65 degrees, and now we're back down to 45. So, woo!
Yes, my daughter at Cornell too had an 81-degree day, and then 2 days later it snowed. So,
yeah, it is what it is. But I'll take
it is what it is. So there you go.
The first thing we want to dive into today was this paper from MITRE, I believe it is, talking about the wizard spider plus sandstorm. Apparently, there's this big test. Tell us what's really going on here.
Without going into all the geeky details, I think if you Google this or you're on some newsletter from cybersecurity companies, it's being advertised everywhere. MITRE is an organization that very well respected in the industry, and they will do tests of different cybersecurity products from time to time. And this time around, they decided to test a number of different EDR products, which is really, in our opinion, in many people's opinions, it's the #1 product to prevent malware attacks and prevent ransomware. They're quite successful from that standpoint. So anyway, so MITRE went out and tested all these vendors, and then actually put out a chart describing the success rate. So we can actually look at the success rate of the different cybersecurity companies. And the first thing that was fascinating. Yes, so it's being, as you can imagine, anybody in the top 5 is advertising this through the roof. The reason why we wouldn't fit into this category, we're not testing this because we don't try to prevent ransomware, right? As you may recall from our previous videos, Nubeva, once a customer of ours gets a ransomware, we go in and reverse it and make it as though it never happened. Okay, so but we don't go about preventing people from getting ransomware, and we don't think that's possible. And so this is actually a great test that described that. Okay, so without going into all the reports and everything else, there's actually a chart that I'm going to show here that is actually published and then unpublished because some vendors actually got kind of upset. The ones you can use your imagination of which ones might have gotten upset and had the power to tell them, hey, remove it. But you're going to see the other vendors in the top 5 putting it on their website everywhere. So you won't need to try too hard to see this chart that I'm actually showing. Okay? So there's actually 2 different columns that are important. The third column is the total rating. So let's remove that for a second. The prevention rating is really the very interesting. That means if you install the product and you do nothing, you almost do nothing, and they are effective at preventing this attack, which is a very comprehensive set of attacks. And so the very best is about 89%. You see Sentinel-1 at the top. And then what's interesting is you're going to see Microsoft at number 6 at 85%. So what that means is if you get your Windows and you keep everything up to date, Windows Defender up to date, you're actually very close to the top, very near the top. And this is why there's a number of different vendors that were not thrilled about this report, right? Because that means if you buy something, you get it for free, and you just make sure you run the latest, which is not easy, right? What a lot of these vendors do is, even if you're not running the latest and greatest, they're still very effective in preventing things, okay? So that's actually very important. So first and foremost, I think the biggest, greatest takeaway is, run your software updates. Don't allow your software to run behind. Okay, so this is important point number 1. Important point number 2 is they have another column that a lot of these vendors are proud, but it's actually very important. I want to touch it. Right. So if you look at the top 2, they have detection rates at 99 to 100%. And so you're going to ask yourself, what is the difference between detection and prevention? If you detect the malware, why don't you just prevent it? Why would you not actually do something about it? And the reason is very simple. That means when they detect it, but they don't prevent it, it's because they're not 100% sure it's not a false positive. So what that means is there's most of these larger EDRs nowadays have a companion product that you pay for that is essentially a service that goes in and says, okay, if you have my service and I see something funny, you give me the right to shut down your entire business, your networking, your storage, everything else. Okay, and if you do that, then it's actually very good. Then you're close to 100% prevention. That's excellent. But as you hear it and as you describe it, think through it, you can imagine a vast majority of businesses is not going to allow a third-party contractor to go in and shut down your entire business. I mean, can you just imagine different verticals and sectors, okay? And so this is very important to understand. So that means if you then want that ability to be close to 100% preventing something from coming, you better have your own staffing. and your staffing needs to be trained in the product to see, is this false positive, false negative. Okay? So for example, one of our investors, who's a very large oil company, is about 250 tickets behind sometimes. This is stats from a couple of years ago. Okay, there were 250 major tickets behind, and so that means even with all the money in the world, you're still not necessarily going to be able to catch up to what you think might be a problem. Mm-hmm. Okay, so then you're going to ask, well, where does Nubeva come in from all of this? So our claim here is you're never going to be able to, for vast majority of the enterprises, you're never going to be able to prevent somebody from getting in. That's why nobody comes in and says we're 100%, right? Yeah. Even Cyber or SentinelOne, which they were close to 100%. It's another vendor. It's MITRE that's saying they're 99 to 100%. Nobody ever goes out and says 100%. So that's why 38% of enterprises sooner or later get ransomware. And that's where we come in. Once you get the ransomware, we come in and we revert exactly what actually happened. And so that's why it's important to understand the differences between, there's a numerous different very successful cybersecurity companies, of which I think the EDR product category is exceptionally useful. XDR, EDRs, there's derivative reach. They're fantastic. They do what they claim. They're the closest thing to do what they claim. And that's really, really important. Okay, so we're huge fans of that. But at the same time, depending on the industry that you're in, most industries, sooner or later, you're gonna get hit. And if you're gonna get hit, well, you wanna be able to revert it back in the lowest cost, lowest amount of resource, lowest amount of time possible. And that's what we're coming.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And as you said, kind of the key takeaway here is keep your software up to date, because it looks like it performs pretty well on its own. If you want to come more percentages, I would recommend just running the Malwarebytes free trial every now and again. That's often what I would do, is just renew the free one. But okay, Randy, awesome. So let's take things from that macro scale and down to the micro scale and talk about Nubeva. Do you have any company updates?
Yes, absolutely. I think we had a number of different shareholders when we put out the last video. They were asking here, how many people that are actually using it, paying for the product, how is the growth rate and everything else. And so all the customers who are using our product have paid for it in one way or another. But at the same time, this is very important to understand. We allow flexibility on the payment. Whereas a product that prevents a malware or ransomware to happen, they want to be paid, right? They want to be paid as they're providing the service. In our case, really the service that we're providing is, if you get hit by ransomware, we help you revert it. So we have two different schedules of methods of payment. One is you pay like all other cybersecurity products, and you pay it on a yearly basis, right? It's a subscription. The other way that we allow people to get into it is you pay a smaller amount upfront. Think about a deductible from that standpoint, okay? And then once you get hit, then you pay a larger amount that you would have paid upfront. Okay, so those are the two methods of which we charge for. So hopefully, without getting to all the different numbers, we'll have the numbers when our quarter numbers go out. But at the same time, that's how we actually charge. Okay, so that's important. So that's from one class. And our success rate is still, anybody who hears the pitch in general engages and moves on and moves forward with us. So we don't expect that to continue happening, but that is going very well. Okay? Good. At the same time, I think from a macro standpoint, I think right around when the Olympics was happening, and I think we talked about this a little bit on our previous video, when Russia was invading Ukraine, there was a lot of talk about different industries, for example, local governments and farming getting hit by ransomware. Yeah. But we started seeing where the general industry of enterprises, the amount of ransomware actually went down. And we were stunned by that. Okay, we were trying to understand, okay, does that mean we now focus on local state governments or universities or farms or agriculture? And it turns out I'd say about the third week of the invasion from Russia into Ukraine, that all went away. We're back to, unfortunately, it's open season again. Ransomware everywhere is ramping up. You're gonna see, if you haven't read the reports, it's more than doubling year over year. Okay, so we had this kind of a pause, which affects our business negatively, but that pause kind of went away. Okay, so we're pretty. In some sense, we feel sad, but at the same time, from a business standpoint, we feel relieved that this was a long-term trend. And we did not expect that to be a long-term trend. Mm-hmm. At the same time, in parallel, we actually, as we started deploying in a larger scale, we did have a product problem. We actually had in certain types of Windows, when our sensors were installed, we were analyzing different memories and different processes many more times. Architecturally, we only need to analyze any memory segment one time only. And we were doing that over and over and over in older versions of Windows, of which we have now resolved. And so this is actually very important large scale experience because people unfortunately still run very old versions of Windows, which is as we started, this is kind of a meeting conversation. Please update that. Don't run older ones. Okay? So, but we are much better prepared now. We have in our testing harness, we are now testing well over 2 million different ransomware signatures, which is staggering. It's just that number. Most of those versions or derivatives of ransomware happen in the last 2 years, which is just staggering amount of malware out there. Okay, we're now testing those, and we are now testing across the board all different versions of Windows, including the latest and greatest. So we were always testing the newer versions of Windows, even the ones that were not shipped by Microsoft. I think what we did, I wish we had covered better, was the very old versions of Windows that we are definitely now covering better. So I'm pretty satisfied with the engineering team. I think we are now massively testing. This is most of our Windows testing is happening in the cloud, in Azure, and some of it in AWS. But I mean, we are covering everything there is. So we feel pretty good about that.
Good. Glad to hear it. Of course, you would hope that people would keep their software up to date, especially when they're even coming to you guys because they're trying to prevent something bad from happening. But like you said, you have to take all variabilities into account. Unfortunately, a very large segment of people are still running on. I'm sure there's people still running on Windows XP and so on right
now. From that perspective, people do come to us because they're sometimes afraid of upgrading. They run such older software. Sometimes they have software that was written by a contractor that retired 5 years ago already. And so they're afraid of upgrading the systems and then affecting their own enterprise usage. And so a lot of times, what we are very appealing from that perspective is we just install, you install it one time and you just don't worry about it again. As opposed to, the benefit of an EDR, for example, is it's constantly making sure that everything's okay. But with that constant service comes with constant maintenance that you are required or somebody's required to go look at. Hey, was that a false positive? No, it's not. False positive? No. In our case, there's no false positive. If you get a ransomware, I guarantee you will know you got a ransomware because the bad actors want to actually contact you, so you pay them. Okay, so it would be unheard of for somebody who gets ransomed and not get contacted for ransom. That wouldn't make any sense. So in our case, when you get attacked, we come in.
Wonderful. Well, Randy, thank you for walking us through this recent news. It is really interesting to see. And again, the takeaway is update all of your systems, everybody. And on top of it, thanks for delivering some Nubeva updates. And everybody, we'll get you some more as soon as they come along the wire. Randy, do you have any closing words before we go?
No, I see that you have a beautiful microphone, and I've been told that sound effects on my AirPod Pros are not great. So I'm going to be upgrading.
Wonderful. Everybody, we will have Randy in HD audio next time around.
There you go.
So stay tuned for that. That'll be a moment to hear. All right, Randy, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.